What's the worst that can happen is a really good question. It's a shame we seldom ask it and almost never think it through. Think of how many tragedies would never have happened if people had actually thought about and honestly discussed the worst that can happen before saying or doing something. While it's a great question for the daily activities of life, it's an even better question for the religious activities of life. Earthly consequences can be bad, but heavenly consequences will be eternal. The heart that seeks God on its own terms has not truly considered the worst that can happen because it thinks it already knows and has dismissed any bad consequences to their service to the Lord. When Amos walked into Bethel, Israel's center of worship, he encountered people who were serving the Lord according to their own rules instead of his. God sent Amos to tell them the worst that could happen was coming: internal collapse and external destruction. Amos 3, 9 through 15. Today's Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible and An American Missionary looks back several decades for an analysis of how this tragedy unfolds in our religious world today. From Plain Talk Magazine, May 1969. The Greatest Tragedy by Joe Fitch. Some tragedies surpass others. The death of an only son is a tragedy of tragedies, yet it is not the greatest tragedy. I remember sitting with parents whose son shipwrecked his faith and became an atheist. In tears, his mother said, "I could have buried him easier." I did not doubt it. I could have found more words of comfort at a grave than in such circumstances. Look at the greater tragedy, the lost soul. There is nothing but a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation which shall devour the adversaries. Hebrews 10, verse 27. It means to be banished from God's presence. 2 Thessalonians 1:7, to a demon's hell. Man's most terrible experience describes the anguish. Not one pleasant thing is found there, not even a drop of water for a parched tongue. The degraded and outcasts, the heartless and oppressors, the arrogant and hypocrites are its inhabitants. And there is no escape, no end, no relief. Such thoughts stagger the imagination, but a lost man is not the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy is to be lost and content. A man who knows he is lost and is disturbed over his prospects will not stay lost. Jesus died for him. Teach him the truth, and such a man will obey. Angels and men will rejoice. It is far different with the lost man who is satisfied. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Proverbs 16:25. A man feels he is right, is satisfied with his religion, as he contentedly walks to his own destruction. For they have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying, "Peace, peace," when there is no peace. Jeremiah 8:11. It is healing like giving a diseased man some tranquilizers and telling him he is fine. He needs to know his condition so he can seek help. Some brethren can't understand our concern for them. After all, they are not worried. "Come back," we cry, but he echoes Judah's words, "Wherein shall we return?" Malachi 3:7. "Preacher, what are you talking about? Return? We haven't been anywhere." He is perfectly satisfied to be half-hearted, though it nauseates the Lord. Revelation 3:15. View the greatest tragedy, lost and content. Others know the truth, know their life is wicked, know the blessings of faithfulness and the wages of sin. What can you say? He knows your pleas before you say them. He has voiced them himself in times past. He tasted the good things and deliberately embraces the world. It is impossible to renew him to repentance. Hebrews 6:1 and following. The greatest tragedy. I reason with my religious neighbors. They are insulted. "You think I am lost?" No matter what I think. Are you lost? Religious folk can be lost and feel safe. Matthew 7:21 and following. You may be an admirable person, even a zealous church worker, and yet be lost. Such commendable traits make the tragedy of your being lost the more lamentable. What a shame you should be content to be less than a Christian. That is the greatest tragedy. Well, today, some 40 plus years later, the religious world has only gotten more tragic. If we won't listen to Joe, how much longer before we hear from Amos? Thank you for listening to this Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible on An American Missionary. Until next time, this is James McClenney. But instead of hoping you have a good day, I hope you seriously ponder what's the worst that can happen if you keep doing your will instead of God's.